In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
Hello, Sublation magazine readers, Sublation media viewers, Sublaters, and Sublated. It is I, Douglas Lane.
And me, Ashley Frawley.
Over here is Ashley Frawley. At the beginning, I always like to, or I feel compelled to say, press the like button, press the subscribe button, press your belly button, support us on Patreon, send us good vibes. Leave a comment and all of those things to help push us in the algorithm. But today I'm actually particularly concerned about trying to expand the reach of this channel as one of my channels of communication has been taken away. So I thought maybe we could start by talking about the biggest, most important story in the news, the fact that I was suspended from Twitter last week. So I can explain what happened, maybe. But
well, to be fair, Doug, you were asking for it. Your skirt was a little short, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the response. That was the response. Really, though, Doug was out there kind of asking for it for a little while. It wasn't surprising.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before I started the stream, I checked my horoscope for the day.
Oh no.
And it said, it will be tempting to believe you are the living, breathing culmination of your own choices. Of course, it's absurd, considering how much of your current circumstance can be attributed to things you have absolutely no control over whatsoever. So, while many of my comrades may have thought I was asking for it, my horoscope disagrees, Ashley. My horoscope is on my side. The people who pump out these fortunes and predictions understand. But I will say this in defense of those people who claim that maybe I was out there asking for it. I do think that the tweet that they say violated the terms of service, which I don't think it actually did, but was coming out of a fit of temper. So I know that the people who've been watching me in the comments before the stream even started are aware that there from time to time I can be a hothead. So what I did was I responded to a tweet from an account called Post Left Watch, which was calling out Breonna Joy Gray for giving a presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a platform to spread his COVID misinformation. And it was the tweet was framing the interview as if it was some sort of massive violation of perhaps even the law, but certainly a violation of the norms that should be held to on the left. Because this was a leftist account looking for people who were leaving the left, the Post Left Watch account. And so my response was sarcastically to say, how is this even allowed? And then I said, RFK Jr. should be given a shot. He should be given a shot. I didn't. Some of that second sentence, some of those words weren't in it, but that's what. And that particular tweet, when I said, "How is this even allowed?" RFK Jr. blankety blank, that was selected as a violation of the terms of service of Twitter, and I appealed and I said, "Listen, that was sarcastic, satirical. I was mocking people who would want to censor him. I was not actually calling for any violence." And so far, that has had no effect on their decision at all. So it looks like a
Doug, Amy Therese got banned for saying that someone needed to be beaten in the election.
Yeah, right.
Like She needs to be beaten. And people were like, oh, you called for violence. We got you. So yeah, you were suspended for much less. But the interesting thing is that people, when I said that you had been suspended, before anyone knew what you said, it was a suspendable offense, let's be honest. Before anyone knew what you said, they were like, wow, I mean, come on, he's been asking for it lately. They just knew. And I was like, well, he actually, it's not that you got angry with somebody or something like that. It was just a sarcastic tweet. You just sarcastically tweeted and didn't choose your words well, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, taken out of context, certainly it, taken literally, definitely a suspendable, by their terms of service, a suspendable tweet. Taken in context, I don't think so.
No, you're right.
Right, but
their terms of service explicitly say that if you're joking, that joking is not like a violation of terms of service. So you were sarcastically like sort of upping the ante, saying, oh, well, if you should, what are you talking about? This should never be allowed.
Right.
And yeah, they took it literally, painfully literally. That actually reminds me, I usually have a pen so that when I have a little flash of something that I want to say, I can write it down. And my pen hit the floor. I heard it, and I've not been able to locate it since. But anyways, but this is the thing that I find so interesting is that there's this terribly, I thought, everybody kind of thought Twitter, well, under Musk, maybe had moved beyond this. But no, the terrifying literal world of online communication and online politics must not be forgotten. Everything is like, it's interesting that people who claim a kind of claim that truth is relative and everything is socially constructed love to be terrifyingly literal and realist about particular things like she needs to be beaten and so on. Of course, not in any way that they truly believe it. They don't truly believe it's literal, but they live in they want us to live in a literal world, and they live in a socially constructed world. They also love to throw around people who lie so easily and so willingly, and who talk about truth as relative, as I said, also love to call people liars consistently. Like that dude who pissed me off a few months back. Not forgotten. Man, he got under my skin, that bastard. But he was lying, like full on. He was like, oh, I'm an old guy from the old left and I'm an old academic. And I was like, no fucking way. You're an old academic. You sound like a 30-year-old grad student. I will put all my money on the fact that you are a first-year master's student, not even PhD, because that will knock some sense into you. Because he was like coming at me just really annoyingly and misrepresenting everything that I was saying, misinterpreting everything I was saying, but from a place of real ignorance. And nobody is that confidently ignorant unless they're the first year.
Unless they're in graduate school.
Yeah. I was 100%. And he's like, no, I've been in the academic. And I just like searched, like I searched his username in like millennial. And he was like, I was born in 1990. Of course he was lying, but he was saying, you liar, you lying. And
what were you lying about, Ashley?
I don't even know. Like I would say, no, this is what you're arguing. And he was like, why do you have to lie? Why do you have to lie?
Well, I want to say that I never believed, I mean, maybe for a second, before Elon actually took over the company, and certainly before I knew the depth of the collaboration between Twitter and the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and so forth, I never believed that Elon Musk was going to be able to create, or even necessarily intended to create, an actual realm of free speech where the First Amendment would be the standard, which he did claim at one point. And one of in recent months, one of the moments where I got into a lot of trouble was when I pointed out that the momentary suppression of Matt Walsh's film "What Is a Woman" indicated that the whatever loosening of restrictions might have been expected from Elon Musk, that they would be short-lived at best and probably would not exist at all, because I was noticing how Twitter, an international company, was being forced to comply with disinformation standards from the EU and from other nations, and from nations around the world. So that because of the pressure that was going to be put on the company by various states and state bodies, governmental bodies, there was almost no chance that actual free speech could prevail on Twitter, and that was my stance all along, and it got me in trouble for saying, yeah, I guess just because I was seemingly defending Matt Walsh, which I was not. I was just saying, look, this shows that even though Musk tried to get some sort of deal with this company, nonetheless these standards apply from the EU, if not from the United States in this case, and I would expect that we're going to see a return or a continuation of the same kinds of policies that were exposed in the Twitter files. And the other thing I've always said is that Elon Musk opened himself up to litigation, because he revealed the degree of collaboration with state agencies that was going on at Twitter. So in any case, I do not believe that we're going to be able to look to any billionaire anywhere to come to the rescue of any aspect of society. Certainly not when it comes to the freedom that individuals should insist upon having, and the right to politically organize and to associate and to speak. The billionaires are never going to be our champions. The big capital will never be our champions. It's never have been.
No, of course. And Elon Musk declaring that saying CIS is now hate speech. And everyone's like, oh my God. Of course, they were saying that he's being a hypocrite. But like, what did you think? That's the whole point. That's why we defend the free speech of people we disagree with. That's why you go into overdrive, to defend the free speech of people you disagree with. Because yeah, sure, it's fine when it's people you disagree with, but it will get turned against you. You think that just because that it benefits you for a short period of time, it's always going to be great? No, of course not. If the rule is there, it's going to be applied to you too. That's the whole point. And of course, underneath Elon Musk's announcement, someone was like, what? That's stupid. Cis isn't a slur. And someone goes, I feel it to be. Do you see how this works now? Because that was the point, right? And that's the hate speech legislation that's going through Ireland at the moment, where it's like, if you feel it to be hateful, oh, we're fucked now then. Right? And it's, of course, nobody truly feels offended, right? Nobody truly feels, people are offended on behalf of groups that don't give a shit. And they're being performatively offended because they fucking hate people and they want to get revenge. And that's why, like, they want to punish people. And we all know this. Everyone knows it's performative victimhood. Everybody knows it, but we all have to go along with it. We're living in this world. As I said, of like, yeah, sorry.
And 5 years ago, or, even a year ago or 2 years ago, when we would complain about, these sorts of standards being held around speech, we were, at least I consider myself to be making a cultural critique. Like, it was, look, we shouldn't have on the left a culture of cancellation. We should try to, hold to a standard where free and open exchange of ideas is the norm. It's not good to create a climate of censorship and cancellation. Now, however, with these new governmental bodies stepping forward to enshrine these standards into law, it's an entirely different game. It's no longer a cultural critique to oppose these kinds of slippery standards around speech, because the power of the U.S. state and the European Union, the Irish state, let alone the Chinese state or the Russian state, is being deployed, and they have a monopoly on violence to enact and enforce these standards. So now what was a culture critique is a political one. And I want to address this comment here. This is Doug Lane's actual words. Freedom of press under capital is limited by capital, that freedom is still a league above the direct suppression of thought implemented by the state. And that is absolutely correct. When you have capital, the so-called free enterprise controlling speech, you can have a lot of conformity because of the way capital concentrates and monopolies form. So, you have major networks and they all sort of sound alike, but nonetheless, competing presses, competing media organizations can at least exist and attempt to get the word out without fear of violent reprisal or suppression. And so it is still, despite the fact that, there's a lot of uniformity and conformity under conditions of monopoly capital, it is still far worse to have a direct state suppression of speech. And I think that's easy to understand. I don't think that's difficult. So.
You would think so. But of course, it doesn't matter, because what's being suppressed most of the time is things that people want suppressed. And they find it difficult to imagine that it's going to come back to haunt them, as it has.
Right. But I mean, that's always the case because, some faction somewhere is going to want the speech suppressed.
Yeah, exactly. And all you need to do, someone says, I'm in Ireland. People aren't easily offended. Well, it's fine then. It's fine. Just give up your free speech.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure it can't possibly be used against us.
It's good the police aren't armed with guns most of the time, but they do still have a monopoly on violence, I believe.
Yeah, it's good that you won't literally be shot on sight when you offend someone. I mean, okay, all right, that's all right. Progress has been made.
Adam, when you said that's not substantiated, I'm not sure what you're talking about. So put that in the chat. So anyhow, I have a list of 7 different things to talk about. I'm thinking a good portion of it will be in the Patreon side because we have a lot to say. I know Alfie Bound, who's here with us, has a lot to say.
Sorry, I shared a comment at the absolute wrong time.
The invisible hand job of the free market. And here comes Alfie to
Alfie
help
is not the
that.
invisible hand job.
No.
I'm ready and willing.
I mean, Adam, I just want to say thank you. I'm glad, Alfie, that let's try to keep it clean. I just want to say, to describe my explanation of why free speech under just capitalist monopoly power was preferable to direct state intervention as like some sort of claim that there's an invisible hand of the market that the level equalizes everything. It's like I have a hard time taking that as anything other than disingenuous. So try again. And let's move on though. The Submersible. That's the big news, isn't it? That's the most important story after my Twitter suspension.
Yes.
I think the most important story that was in the news was how many people were on it? The 4 people were in the Submersible.
5.
Was it 5? 5 people in the Submersible. All of them dirty, rotten billionaires who basically deserved it. But go ahead, Alfie.
I just want to say I can't wait to talk about this. I've been excited all day.
Okay. All right.
Well, I have had My Heart Will Go On stuck in my head all day. And do you know what happened too? Because, all right, I was thinking we can't play the song, right? But I used to play the clarinet, and I know how to play it on the clarinet. And I was like, I'll bring my clarinet. But no, it was stuck in my head, and I thought to myself, I haven't heard that song in ages. I'll play it. And I was like, that's what happens. So Alfie, explain about this song.
Yeah, I mean, no, this you know what? Like everyone else over the last few days, I was just thinking, this is so weird that this has happened. Everyone's refreshed. Like I had like work meetings and so on. Yeah, I mean, I agree with the comment. The son actually, that's the only. Let's just have a disclaimer. The sad bit is the son who wanted to spend time with his wanker dad on Father's Day or whatever. Oh, I'm going to get us demonetized by speaking like that.
No, I think wanker doesn't. That's passable because it's so British that no one even knows what it means at YouTube.
But anyway, yeah, no, the disclaimer is that that's the sad story, but the rest of it's just that it's incredible and funny. But no, I mean, yeah. So what I like everyone else, I was thinking, this is so crazy that we're all refreshing our feeds. Like I was in work meetings and everyone was like secretly checking on the Submersible, you know. So I think this is really interesting. But like the thing that made me think there's really something crazy going on was when I heard that news yesterday, and I said this to you guys, that when I heard that Celine Dion's "My Heart Will Go On" was the most listened to song on Spotify yesterday, I thought we really are living in a crazy world, because there is something here that's like really needs unpacking or whatever. I've got a little theory of it, but I just think this is utterly bizarre, and it really sort of is one of those moments where it makes visible sort of what's going on in what a weird, strange world we live in today, I guess.
Yeah, well, what's your theory about? I mean, look, I want to confess that my kids came to visit me, and we had a barbecue in my backyard, not on Sunday, but over the week, and
To celebrate?
we were talking. No, it's just no, not to celebrate. Just, like I think that my son just likes to check in on his poor divorced dad from time to time and make sure I'm fine. So so they showed up and we grilled some meat we took the grill pill. But during the visit, he was of course prattling on about the Submersible story because it was on everyone's mind. And what was I? No, this is one of those senior moments. What was I leading up to? Oh, during that time, I said, well, let's listen to the music from the musical Titanic, which is a forgotten musical, which I happened to see when it was touring. And it's not a great musical, but I turned on the song that goes like "There she is, Titanic," for a little while. So I am no better than the people who are listening to the theme song from Titanic, the movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Alfie, that the Spotify thing was probably driven entirely by me playing the song on repeat.
Well, the weird thing was, I just had a quick chat with a friend of mine who was around for dinner on Friday night, and I had totally forgotten this, but apparently I played the song on Friday night. So I actually also contributed, and I must have unconsciously, but anyway, it's all going on. But I suppose what I think about this, the way to think about this, I've been thinking about it all day now, thinking how fun it'd be to talk about. But I think it goes back to kind of what I was saying to you guys last night. Was there was a time when people had there was a united. I mean, my approach is kind of, I'm from Britain, obviously, as you guys can hear, but so it's quite British what I'm saying, but it also applies everywhere, I think. But there was a time when there was very much a unified Britain, and in certain senses, Britain is the emblem of this kind of unified nation. That's the role it plays. And the Titanic, also from the story from 1912, was all about this, British progress or whatever. It's amazing in Belfast, where my partner's from. They're very proud of having built the Titanic, even though it failed. So it's got this incredible history of the Titanic. Is the James Cameron film the biggest film of all time? It might be.
Isn't that Avatar?
It was at the time, definitely.
I think
at the time I was obsessed with that movie when I was a kid. Absolutely obsessed. I went to see it in theaters. I don't know how many times. It was the most expensive movie. It was like a cultural phenomenon at the time.
I think the list goes like Avatar, Titanic, and then Herbie Rides Again. Those are the three biggest movies, I believe. But anyway, go ahead.
We use our money, our funds extremely wisely in capitalism, as you can tell.
Yeah. No, James Cameron's been on GB News talking about the Submersible. So it's quite interesting. I was getting into all that. So anyway, I think there's something about it that really, obviously there's something about this story of the Titanic and it is all to do with class. Like, criticize the film all you want. Zizek's done his famous critique of the film where the whole thing is enjoyable precisely because if it hadn't crashed, there'd be some unified world, some happy, Jack and Rose living together in New York or whatever. If the disaster hadn't happened, there would be the world we dream of. So it's all to do with like utopianism and utopian thinking and so on. And it's all to do with class. Obviously, there's a long history of this. The film's about class. The Titanic incident is about class. And then today we're sort of reliving it through through this kind of lens of the billionaires, and we don't know what this means, the 1%, how they live, and so on. So there's this weird, like, strange jouissance, like, are we enjoying it? Are we, what's but I think the way to sort of understand what's happened this week with this thing is through this kind of this kind of concept of unity and so on. So basically, when I was growing up, I remember, this sounds like a sort of completely a sort of digressive way into it, but when I was growing up, there was in the UK, I don't know if you ever get these in America, but do you ever get things like a power cut, when like too many people are using electricity at the same time in the street, and it like goes black for a bit and all your electricity goes off? Have you ever had those?
We get brownouts and we get power blackouts and things like that.
Blackouts, yeah, right. So there was a time when I was growing up, the British soap opera Coronation Street was on at 7:30 every day until 8, and it had its advert break at 7:45, and people would make a cup of tea at 7:45 because they were in the middle of Coronation Street, and they would drink their cup of tea during the second half. So, and the power cut would then happen because so many people were doing the same thing at the same time. Now, that sounds like a depressing situation where people are so predictable, and we're all such morons glued to our TVs that we can't even, we'll even make a cup of tea at the time we're told to make a cup of tea. We do exactly what we're told. We're the sheeple, the people who just... But actually, I would argue, and this is my little theory of this submersible thing, that was the revolutionary subject, because we were doing the same thing at the same time. There was actually a universality in society, and we all had something in common. I remember that I used to have my dinner after The Simpsons. Now, that's what a lot of people did. Now, if I ask people today, there's that such structure is gone. So all of the things which structured our everyday life and made us a unified nation or group or whatever, they have totally fragmented. And obviously it's the digital world that does that. It's curated news feeds, following different people on Twitter, having different Netflix recommendations. So we've moved from a world of where we were so predictable that we made a power cut happen at 7:45 every day to one where almost no two people are sharing the same experience. And that matches up with the culture wars and how divided we are from each other, and how we focus on the differences between our identities instead of the universal aspects of life. So what
I want to make an aside here, just a quick aside. I used to work with a guy, it was my boss, who would repeatedly make the same joke over and over again, which was this. He said, if everyone went to the toilet at the same time, society would collapse. And that's okay.
Exactly. If we're all going to make a cup of tea at the same time, at least potentially we could have a revolution, because but what's happened, so this submersible thing, it reminded me of something like during COVID, when everyone was glued to the TV, hearing the daily updates about it, reminded me of clapping for the NHS. I'm sure you had equivalents. I know you had equivalents in the US, like doing the same thing. And
we would go around with our guns and shoot them in the air in the US.
or like there was a big, sometimes it's the weather over here. We know we British people love to talk about the weather. There was a big storm and everyone was glued to the TV over there. So what these moments represent is actually quite a rare occurrence where everyone is doing the same thing. And it's very interesting that BBC choose to sort of live report it, and everyone's glued to the same thing for a short time. And so I guess I think I would say that these moments could be seen as sort of truly revolutionary, really, in a way that's nearly impossible in the digital age. And so whilst I think that laughing at the dead billionaires is silly, it's a bit like watching White Lotus or something. We actually all, and I think there's a lot of time for Doug, I think you're about to, now that you're a sort of crackpot conspiracist, you're about to say that Ocean Gate have done this deliberately so that they can become a famous thing. I think that's probably true. There is a media conspiracy. There is something going on. But there's also a reminder here that things have got actually much, much worse due to digital capitalism, and the possibility of having this universal connection with each other is almost has now come down to something as miserable as this. So I think that the fact that everyone, let me just finish this last point, the fact that everyone's got My Heart Will Go On in their heads at the same time, that's fucking brilliant. And it does actually show there's a possibility of us seeing each other as people and as universal subjects in this very fraught world of the culture wars, where identity differences are stressed, by almost every other form of media and the internet. But actually, there is still something that makes us all humans here. And come on, it's great. Jack and Rose stood there at the front of the Titanic, and it cuts against class. It is. I suppose to sort of try and bring it full circle. It is therefore it is a class thing, and the Titanic was a class thing. This what class is. Class is the ability to enjoy Celine Dion singing that song this week. And that
I remember when Marx wrote that in the Communist Manifesto. All history, has been a history of class struggle, and by that I mean the struggle against those who can enjoy Celine Dion and those who can't.
Exactly.
Well, now you're making me feel bad about my, little conspiracy mind and wanting to look for the dark underbelly of the story. But one thing that I have written down here is that, of course, the Navy knew that it was very likely that the submersible had imploded on Sunday. They had picked up the sound of the implosion 2 hours after the submersible went, underwater. And then, so the story has been, one of the stories in the background has been, well, to what extent was this purposefully covered up? What was the, why was this not revealed earlier, that there was a very good chance, at least, that the sound of the implosion had been picked up? And I was looking through the news feed, and PolitiFact had a fact check on this story, and what they said was it was the claim that Biden knew in advance and had covered up the fact that the submersible imploded was not true. Well, actually, it was interesting because I clicked on the link for the fact check, and it had been taken down. So in order to find the fact check, I had to go to the Wayback Machine and see what it had been. And I don't know why PolitiFact took it down. But they, the question is, did Biden know before the rest of the nation did that it would most likely had imploded? Did the Navy's recording of the implosion make it to Biden? That information make it to Biden? The answer to that, I think, is very likely. I mean, the president is given a daily briefing, daily, and I would think that being the part of the culture, that Biden would be curious to know what was going on with the submersible, and whatever facts that the Coast Guard and the Navy had would be made available to him relatively early. So I think it is likely that President Biden knew that they had heard the sound of the implosion before the rest of us did, and days before. So then the question is, why did the Navy, and more importantly, why did the Coast Guard, who had been updated, not share that information until after the debris had been discovered? Why was it? What was the point of creating such a big media circus around this story? And my feeling is that I can't possibly know. But Ashley disappeared. But in any case, what do you think, Alfie?
Well, it's interesting. So one of the things that would be worthwhile is, I can see that the company is presumably going to be, the company's presumably going to be really popular now, and people are going to be wanting to pay this money for these trips. I think this probably is the start. I think it all connects to this kind of fetishization of billionaires as well. Like, the death of the thing is not actually the thing here. It's a glimpse into something. Like, these TV shows are so. Succession's obviously one, White Lotus, and they almost present themselves as a critique of billionaires or whatever, right? But actually, it's about. It's about the fetishization of billionaire culture. Salt Bay, for example, the Salt Bay thing, all the Instagram clips of Salt Bay and the rich people going for their steaks and stuff. The appeal of this was this kind of really strange kind of. So I can see that. I can see the point that the reason this has gone in the media cycle in the way it has is probably way more deliberate than you'd think, and it matches a pattern that's going on. Whereas I feel like your explanation is more like, there's some, yeah, maybe you have gone to conspiracist or whatever. Because what does it matter if Biden doesn't know what is right in front of him, to be honest. I mean,
well, that's true, probably, but
it's not that it's a pattern. There's a pattern here, and that's why. I mean, this is now talking about what conspiracy theory is and stuff, rather than. But what looks like a pattern is a pattern, but there's no one running this pattern. It's not like Ocean Gate would have said, "Let's sink this guy, and then we'll eventually be a successful company 10 years down the line because we'll capture the whole globe's attention on a company they've never heard of before." But there's a pattern that is there, and it's to do with our fetishization of billionaires and all this culture. So it's not that. So you're right and wrong, if you see what I mean.
Well, I mean, I don't think the fact that Biden knew is the story. I don't think Biden is sitting there running the ship on a micromanagement kind of level, and I think that it is kind of, if it's the fact that like Biden knew on Sunday before the story even broke that they had heard the sound of the implosion, that's not a very relevant detail. I agree with you. Like, that doesn't really lead to anything. But I do wonder, when stories of this nature dominate the news, what's being served. And I can tell you this, like, in general, when we are given stories which, no matter what the outcome, they will have no significance in the majority of people's lives. Like, they will not, it does not change anything what the outcome of that story was. Because let's say that they got pulled up and they didn't die, and it was a happy ending, and the girl was pulled from the well and rescued. That would be great. I would have loved to watch that. That would have been the good outcome. But it wouldn't change the fact that probably more regulations need to be put in place on these submersibles, and and possibly the whole business of going down to the Titanic with tourists is questionable, and that story in and of itself is so minor in the grand scheme of things, given how the situation in just, let's say, world politics is so fraught with peril right now. Like, it does seem to me that being distracted by trivial stories has a political significance, that when we are offered a way to be distracted from significant stories, even if there isn't a particular significant story that they're trying to cover up, but just overall, like the UFO story that came out a couple weeks ago from this supposed intelligence officer, David Grush, who had no real evidence to give, but it was a sensational story, and it kind of went through the news cycle. And at the time I said, well, what are they trying to distract us from? That was the question. But I think my final conclusion was, what they're doing, what the point of it is to create confusion and to kind of depoliticize the population, and to also kind of train the population to accept that there won't be resolutions to stories, that these things are all happening outside of the public sphere of influence, and that the point isn't even to know the truth, but just to participate in the tale. And I think it's important to try to know the truth as well. But anyway.
I mean, as someone who studies the news media,
Mm-hmm.
And agenda setting and so on, the truth is often much, much more banal. Like, the way that something makes it onto the news agenda really depends on, news value. There might be a few things, a few frames that are, these are the things that have made headlines, ironically, or documentaries, the times where what should be in the news was stipulated by government or whatever. But for the most part, like, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's new, if it's different, if there's a human interest angle, this story was a conglomeration of all of these things. There were some rich people, there was some intrigue there. There's the story of the Titanic, which is of course timeless.
Yeah, but actually, it came
And
down
this
to a
idea of
decision.
hubris as well. Like, there were all these parallels with the Titanic going down because of the hubris of the rich and so on. And now you've got these billionaires who have all this excess wealth to go down and take these risks. So there was all this to the story. There's a sense of like Schadenfreude. It appeals to the left and to the right for various reasons. These kinds of stories have a potential to make an impact, albeit
Sure.
short-lived.
But the story only existed because the Coast Guard decided to send out a tweet and make themselves publicly available to the press on this story. And they did that the day after they had been alerted by the Navy that it most likely had already imploded. And that
and I think what we were
discussing
discussing yesterday with John Bunch, I found that to be, again, like part of the reason why things make it into the news is because they perpetuate the existence of some bureaucracy, right? So something, news items don't just make their way onto the news because reality speaks for itself. Somebody must draw attention to it. And if there's an organization, particularly an organization with some cachet behind it, they're more likely to get coverage. Coast Guard being an obvious one. So the Coast Guard alerts to this great story, this rescue effort that's ongoing, suspenseful and so on. And it was newsworthy because people were glued to it. They were watching the updates. But why would the Coast Guard do that? Why does anybody try to bring attention to an issue? Often to perpetuate themselves. I'm just going through the final proofs of my book. And, it's tempting to kind of say like, well, why would you construct, for instance, the last chapters around student mental health? Why would you construct the student mental health crisis? People always want to ask that, like, is there some sort of conspiracy? Are there nefarious reasons why? There was no mental health crisis in universities. Students experience even self-reported mental health issues at a far lower rate than the age-matched general population. They commit suicide far less than the age-matched population. So why? Well, the answer is because counseling services were getting cuts. And it is in their interest to perpetuate their own existence, to say, look, what I'm doing here is really, really important. They had been expanding what they were doing for a long time to all these different issues. And so they were making this big issue. And then other groups also with an interest jumped in. So, I can guarantee that as John Bunch said yesterday in our private conversation, for years now, you're going to see there are going to be PowerPoints from everybody involved, every institution involved. They were like, see, what we do is so important. This search and rescue effort for all this stuff that's so expensive that just sits around all this time is actually super important, and you should keep funding it. It's just something banal.
I think that's very possible, but the Coast Guard is a part of the U.S. military, and the U.S. military is the most well-funded military on the planet, and we are at a time of global conflict. And I don't know if the Coast Guard needs to make a big story about a submersible in order to justify its continued funding. But if there is any
they'll make big stories about anything if they can.
Yeah, but right. But if we could show that after the submersible story, even the part of the Coast Guard that was responsible for the search and rescue was then received more funding, then that I think would be good evidence for that explanation. But what
I think the comments in there are really interesting here. I wanted to say something about Ashley's point, but yeah, the point you're making, Doug, as one of the comments there says, is precisely the funding does need to create narratives. If you've applied for a bit of funding, you'll see this. You got to say this stuff. You got to tick all these boxes. You've got to spin a narrative that's to do with, so it's exactly, your point is proving Ashley's point that as the comment says, that the funding succeeds because it can tell these stories or whatever. But I mean, can't believe people in the comments are saying I'm the opposite of Stefan. No, this isn't right. Anyway, but I want to say to Ashley's point that, yeah, this is kind of also what I wanted to think about with this Celine Dion thing. Is that's why the Celine Dion thing is important. It's because the universalness only comes, because I think this comment is right. What you said, Ashley, that the right and the left are watching it for very different reasons, right? So in that sense, it's a fake unity. It's not actually a collective experience because people are watching it for very different reasons, different parts of the story. So we're looking at the same content, but we're we're doing it still in our typical divisive way, right? So but then the where the sort of libidinal energy comes in is when it's like playing a song like that or whatever, and it's those moments there where there is a connection between the left and right. I think that's something to sort of seize on, and it's something we try and do at Sublation, I guess, in some ways, right? When there is something where the left and right are interested in it for different reasons, that's also a possible point of connection or whatever, where you can kind of break through this kind of divisive world or whatever. So I think that's interesting, actually, that people come to it for different reasons. And I definitely think all this stuff, as you know, like, oh, all these people complaining about, oh, they spent so much money rescuing billionaires, but they wouldn't do that for migrants or whatever. You know, these kind of equivalences and stuff. This is kind of silly, but for some reason, this does kind of crystallize. It attracts people who would normally not be talking to each other. And I think that, so I do think there's something in this, I don't know, opening out of this. Your view, Doug, is just that, I don't know, you've just lost it. You're just
No, I think it's very possible that the reason the story was pushed, even though the outcome was most likely, you know, they had a very good reason to suspect, more than suspect, that the outcome had already, occurred, that there was going to be no rescue, from the very beginning of the story, that was basically known as well as it could be. I mean, look, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't have been a search and rescue effort made. I'm just saying the story didn't really have legs, given what was known at the start. There was no suspense to it. It was, but, and then one other reason why they might not have given us all the information was because they wanted to run a search and rescue effort, and they didn't want it to be controversial that they were. That would be another reason why they did that. But my overall point is that the way the news is structured often enough is that we are led to treat the news as something that's happening out there, that it's and all of society is relatively opaque. So we get the news, but we don't really expect to get the truth from the news. We don't expect for the events in the world to be transparent, for there to be a follow-up on stories. Often enough, stories will hit the news and then they'll drop out of the news cycle completely, and we'll never get the conclusion. And one example of that I'm going to move on to is the origin of COVID, and what exactly happened to bring on this world pandemic. We're being asked right now by the current administration to accept the idea that we may never know, or that we will never know, the actual origin of COVID-19. Recently, there was a deadline that Biden missed, but then eventually kind of halfway met, to declassify all information that the U.S. government and intelligence communities had around the question of the origin of COVID-19. And what was released was very, very partial. And it came after White House spokespeople came out and said, hey, well, maybe we'll never know, which is kind of the same thing that people will say about these UFO stories. Like, oh, well, this guy made these claims, I guess we'll never know if it's true or not. Like, well, there's ways to know whether there are UFOs in bunkers, right? Get the documents that he supposedly looked at, get the witnesses that supposedly talked to Grush, and ask them to, validate their claims, go to the supposed bunkers where these spaceships are located, see if they're there. With COVID origins, release all the information, go and interview the scientists in the Wuhan lab who were supposedly the first to get sick, find out exactly what gain of function research was taking place in the labs, and report it. And if it takes a while and some effort to do that, nonetheless continue. But instead, the public is kind of constantly asked not to really to accept that they're going to be ignorant ultimately, and that their reaction to the news around them should be driven by their emotions and kind of confirmation bias and so forth. So anyway.
Oh, I just threw a comment up on the screen where someone said, when left and right jump on the same bandwagon, that makes me suspicious. I absolutely agree. Every time that there's some kind of issue that speaks to the right and speaks to the left for various reasons, you know that you're being sent onto a playing field, which is the wrong one. The game is elsewhere. And I also wanted to say that just sorry, it was a wonderful segue and a great intro to the next topic, but I just wanted to say on the submersible point was we were laughing about millionaires, billionaires in some cases, getting crushed. Well, the CEO technically wasn't a billionaire. And we can joke about this, but I think it's really important to point out that we can personify capital. But that doesn't actually help us at all. Yes, it is us versus them in a class sense because we have opposing interests, but this isn't because they're evil people and deserve to die. It's because their interests as a class oppose ours, and we actually share something in common, which is that we are rational human beings pursuing our self-interest, the same starting point that bourgeois economics takes, Marx takes as well, that we should not believe when we are told that our interests are the same. They are diametrically opposed, but not because we're bad people and not because we're good people, but to perpetuate ourselves as a class, to perpetuate humanity in some cases, we have to pursue different things, and this puts us in conflict with each other. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't help to celebrate when people die. I know it's like, it can be like sort of satisfying in that they live in a world of like freedom from want and freedom that maybe we would like to live in, and that they obviously live off of our own exploitation, but killing them won't help. That's not, we don't want to personify capital, because then you wind up going down that kind of weird quasi-fascist kind of route of like all these evil people doing bad things. And that's what Marxists are accused of, and that's not what we are.
No, I just very quickly, and I'll leave you guys to the next topic, but I just, last thing on the submersible, I think that point you're making, Ashley, is absolutely right about the personification of capital. This is a capitalism problem, not a, and it, because one of the things I was thinking when I was thinking today what to say about this, I was tempted to say that there's all about castration of these billionaires or whatever, and especially because the submersible itself, it looks not only like a sort of penis that's been chopped off, but if you were to use a pair of scissors to cut off a penis, and I'll just do it with my hands here. So
if I were, I would get arrested. That would be bad. I'm not a medical doctor.
You got to see what I'm saying. That the scissors would. Do
I have to see what you're saying about chopping up penises?
It sort of cleave the top part of the penis into that little sort of wispy ice cream thing that the submersible has. It does. It does kind of look like that, but the reason I didn't want to, the point is very quickly, the reason I didn't want to say this is a castration thing is because the problem is that all of this castration stuff is how did you really nicely put it, Ashley, a personification of capital. Celebrating our boss getting Me Too'd or celebrating a billionaire dying is the same thing, and the problem is it's a personification of capital that actually doesn't see that the problem is structural rather than individual. And so I agree with that.
Okay,
there you go. There's the thing.
Wait, I want to. I put it in the wrong place. Let me see if I can. That's what she said. Put it in the wrong place. Okay, let's try it again. I'll get this. I
missed that.
Get it. I'm gonna get it up here. Okay, here we go. So, so now describe again where you would cut and which part is the
okay, so you cut the penis with a pair of scissors from below, and it will pinch the skin together into that point and sort of at the top part of the snip and sort of leave so it does. You've got to imagine that's just been snipped off, which of course it literally was snipped off. Yeah, it does also look like a turd. The sphincter is just kind of closed around that point there, and it's just sort of dropped.
It looks like Brian Griffin's tail.
All right.
But anyway, so I'm going to leave you with that, and you guys do the next topic, and I'm here for submersibles only. So
and penis castration, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, and oh wait, where did all the comments go? So anyway, oh, here we go. I wanted to go back to so you're gonna leave, Alfie, or you want to stick around?
Well, I'll leave. I'll leave. And,
get out.
Yeah.
All right. So there was a comment from Adam again, who is my foil this in this stream, where he said something like, and I was gonna flash it on the screen, put it on the screen, but I can't find it now. Where he said I had claimed earlier that the capitalist free market is a superior mediating force to the state. And what I'll say is that if you have a public television or public media that is restricted in the same way that the U.S. state is restricted, then I would think that a publicly held social media platform might be much more free than something controlled by Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey or Zuckerberg or what have you. But if you have an effort to control information directed by this intelligence community, and then it's backed by the basically the police, then you have a level of suppression and oppression that goes beyond what even monopoly capital can achieve, because you could under monopoly capital, there's always a possibility that you could have this tiny little marginal media project that maybe nobody sees or not very many people see, but at least it exists and some people will see it. And whereas concurrently, especially if the Restrict Act passes, the state will have the ability to not only censor what's on social media platforms, control what's being reported by the mainstream newspapers and media companies, but also put any company that tries to emerge to compete and put forward alternative versions of the news, to talk about current events or the world, or publish novels or what have you, from a dissident perspective, or from a perspective that does not align with what the state wants to be propagated. It will be put out of business. The Restrict Act, it requires that the Department of Commerce look for disinformation and close down media outfits that don't fit within within national security interests, which could be anything from, and one example would be like if you claimed that the Chinese response to the pandemic was superior to Europe's response, that would be disinformation to be suppressed and would be probably warrant your company getting shut down. So yeah, it's far worse to be to have information controlled by the police and than it is to have a monopoly capitalist dominate large parts of the market. And I think that I've now adequately explained what I mean. So,
and of course, what we have is both.
Of course, I'm not dropping the entwinement argument. It is absolutely the case that not only were these, that the state was directly dictating to the social media companies and media companies what would count as disinformation and what wouldn't. They set up terms of service. And no, I'm not dropping the entwinement argument, and I don't see why I should. All right. I'm just I gear up. I have these arguments every day. I put on my armor. It's like, come on, people, come at me. And maybe I need to take a chill pill.
But you got into a kind of lengthy argument on Facebook that I got dragged into. So now everybody, Doug is off Twitter. He's spending his time arguing with people on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I asked people, because I suspect that the reason why people don't care that much is because the people being censored are those they want to be censored. And ever since the rise of no platforming, which of course has gradually spread from actual fascists to fascist adjacent to once you brushed past a fascist in a shopping center, to anybody who says something that you don't like. So the left's commitment to expression and the ability for people to hear things and to reflect and not just act has dwindled for a long time. But I suspect that the reason why they don't care is because they agree that the people who are being censored should be censored. And so I asked this person if it was like gender affirming care that was being censored. If governments put out a thing that was like, this is misinformation, would you?
Which they're trying to do in certain red states. That's not right.
Course.
Yeah.
That's like the big point that I was trying to make is that obviously it's going to be used against you. If you think that you're always going to have corporations on your side or the government on your side, you are sorely mistaken. You live in a dream world. That's the whole point is that you have to defend people with whom you disagree. Always. Because if you can't do that, you really don't believe in free speech. You don't believe in it. And also you don't believe, and part of freedom of speech and freedom of expression is not just about like allowing people to spout off whatever they want, but also having faith in audiences, that they don't just hear something and act, that we are reflective. And if you don't believe in that, you don't really believe in socialism. You don't really believe in the self-emancipation of the working class because you don't have any faith in them. You don't have any faith in everyday people. But anyway, so I asked this person, would you be angry in that particular situation? And do you remember what the person responded?
No, remind me, what did they say?
He said that he would be angry because that's a protected group. But it depends on what country you're in, because in the UK, it's kind of a gray area because sex reassignment is protected and sex is protected, but gender identity isn't. So it's not. But it depends. Like some people make that argument. But that's kind of how it's played out in the courts as well, is that no, according to the Equality Act 2010, sex is a protected characteristic, sex reassignment is a protected characteristic, but gender identity isn't. And also beliefs about sex, about biological sex, are legal beliefs, which is crazy that you should have to go to court to kind of say that sort of thing. Much as you may not like these kinds of ideas, I think the idea that some people might have strong beliefs about the consequential nature of biological sex is obviously something that people should be allowed to hold. Anyways, and he said no. He said no, as long as it's about like sort of, because that was a protected thing, then no, he would be angry. But these beliefs are not protected.
My Facebook followers I built up over, more than a decade, right? So someone asked like, who was I arguing with? And they are a mix of like family members, science fiction writers, friends of friends, people who are the parents of kids that my kids went to school with. It's like, and those people are more likely to see the people who are like, I think the algorithm works if you're like actually within a network of in real life people, like people that, I may have actually met their spouse or something like that, you're more likely to see. So that particular person was, I don't think, representative of anyone, on the far left. That was some guy who, whose kid went to the free school along with my kid back when I was a hippie. Like, like it was, it's like not necessarily representative of anything. But you can tell, like I can tell when there's some actual like Marxists in the thread, and there's a good portion of them in Facebook. By the way, I'm also on Instagram. People should go follow me on Instagram. I'm really enjoying taking pictures of my neighborhood and sharing all the natural beauty in my neighborhood. You should go take a look at that. I put up pictures of flowers and sunsets on Instagram. We're coming up to an hour. We should maybe close out.
Yeah, so I have more to say about when invention becomes a business, drawing on the Grundrisse, because we were supposed to have our final reading group this weekend, but to give people more time to finish reading the text and join in, we've postponed it to next weekend. So you can join in if you want to have a sense of what I'm talking about. But drawing on the grinters, I want to talk a little bit more about the fetishization of entrepreneurship, invention, the conglomeration, the unholy marriage of carbon, what was it? A carbon fiber hull and titanium, what do you call them? End thingies. I wrote it down, but anyways, all of these different inventions that get combined and so on. I want to talk about that. And if you join us on Patreon, you will get a lecture from me every week. And these lectures are quite labor intensive. So, it's value for money. So join.
Yeah. And other things that you might see on the Patreon, I will be releasing more audio articles from Sublation Magazine. And so if you sign up to receive the audio version of Sublation Magazine, those will be coming this week, more articles. Also, we're in the midst of planning out a new line of books for Sublation, which may not be available exclusively on the Patreon, but which we will be making available. It'll be audiobooks only, books that are written to be audiobooks. So we're hoping to roll that out, and I'm going to go ahead and announce it because I'm very excited about that. And also, if you sign up for Patreon, you can see the Critical Cuts videos that YouTube demonetizes. I've been waiting to release 2 now Critical Cuts videos until YouTube gets a chance to review it to see if they want to demonetize it or if it actually will be fine for all advertisers. The reason I wait is because if I put it out and it's monetized, it's not that we make a lot of money on that, but just that it gets pushed further by the algorithm, and I want people to watch my work. I put so much time into it.
Oh my God, it's so much time. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they're great. They're really good. And the one that you sent me the script for, is that one that's in the pipeline still?
No, I finished it and it was demonetized. And it's on the Patreon right now, and it's called "Are You a Deep Fake?" And it's different from most of my other Critical Cuts videos. It's maybe not as serious as some of the other Critical Cuts videos I've done. So there's 2 of them up right now that have not been released to the public. You can see them now on Patreon. Also, if you want to message me directly, you sign up for Patreon, you can send me nasty comments directly through the Patreon, and that has happened lately. So I enjoy that as well. So come on over to the Parrot Room, where we'll be continuing to talk about a variety of things. I want to talk about Joe Rogan, RFK, and Dr. Peter Hotez, and as well as maybe talk a little bit more about the origins of COVID. And did you know that the U.S. election campaigns are using AI to generate ads? That this is becoming the new way to save money on campaign advertising. We'll see you over in the Parrot Room. Thanks for watching this version of the first half of the Sublation Magazine show. We'll see you there.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as